Welcome to the Brooklyn Research Podcast. I'm here with my guests, this year's 2018 Brooklyn Research Summer Research Team. They've been working for the last 12 weeks.
Yeah, that's right.
On a very exciting project, new forms of interaction. I want to introduce first Nick Wallace. He's a ITP grad student in NYU's ITP Interactive Telecommunications program.
Hi.
Also, we have Huiyi Chen, also at ITP.
Hi there.
And we also have Nicole Cabalquinto.
Hey.
CUNY City Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth member, who unfortunately can't be with us today, Kathy Ching, but she's also been a great part of the team. So start us off and tell us a little bit about the project. You guys basically are looking at new ways of interacting with, in a broad sense, computers, or in this case, it took the form of a game control, but it really is kind of more of a far-reaching idea. Tell us a little bit about sort of the initial, you guys kind of went deep in terms of understanding what the history of game controllers or interfaces and controls. And what was that process like? I mean, in terms of understanding the general history, what kinds of things were elements that you saw as, oh, that's been done before, or there are ways of looking at things that led you down the path that you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting, certainly, to do some of this research and go back and look kind of at the evolution of design and game controllers. And, I think for myself and a lot of us have memories of playing with some of those controllers at different points in time when we were younger, that kind of thing. But one thing that I wasn't really aware of or wasn't really clear about was some of these early kind of out there game controllers we found for the NES, for example, some of these voice-activated controllers, some of these, the controller that was a D-pad that you stood on and balanced left or right, or that kind of thing. And so just kind of some of the out-of-the-boxness, I guess, if you will, of early controllers, and that kind of thing was a little bit surprising to me. I was more familiar with, an Atari joystick and an early kind of NES controller, that kind of thing. So that was interesting for me. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely had to look back at the history of gaming controllers to get a better scope of like which devices were useful, which were an absolute flop, and why did that happen? Or like, for example, Pong, you have the use of a knob control, and then it evolved into the joystick to add another axis of movement. And it was also important to see how controller design evolved by paying more and more attention to ergonomics. Mm-hmm. Like you start off with, the uncomfortable rectangular Nintendo controller, and then it was followed by the rounded Super Nintendo controller. So controllers just became more rounded to feel better in the player's hands. So in order to develop new forms of interaction, we have to understand the failures and successes of the past.
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
And design accordingly.
So there's sort of a co-evolution. You also see a lot of, in this case, the gameplay kind of evolve back and forth in terms of what the controllers were allowing you to do, where some were highly specialized, obviously, for certain games. And that was, some of the field research that you guys did. I know that you went to did you go to Chinatown?
Yeah, the arcade in
Chinatown. See the arcade and see a lot of some more specialized controllers, some that have become more standardized, which is sort of the culture that led to console culture and things like that as well.
Yeah.
But games were really something that wasn't the core focus of this initially, but really became sort of a way of saying, well, we want to build controls for something. And games were really a nice way of doing that. It seems like, what were some of the games that you were able to build controllers for? These are classics, or somewhat classics anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the sense of starting off and kind of looking at some of these early simple arcade games, that kind of thing. Things like Galaga was something that a big one that we ended up doing a lot of work around. Things that had these kind of simple few axes, one or two axes, and straightforward kind of control scheme allowed us to kind of work from almost from the ground up rather than trying to jump into something with a ton of different things going on. So yeah, we really focus on games like Galaga, like Flappy Bird, just these
Super
kind
Mario.
of Super Mario as well. Yeah.
And then from that point, these games as sort of objective endpoints for some form of physical control, something that you would have some kind of physical interaction, obviously, to be able to control that. Strangely enough, you ended up sort of fixating or landing on kitchen appliances and kitchen tools. But can you guys talk a little bit about how that place was landed on?
Yeah. We realized really early on that we were all foodies. Like we were always thinking about food. Like when we went to the Chinatown Fair Arcade, we were across the street at Noodle Village, and we were just eating noodles, of course, and critiquing the skin of the soup dumplings, and like we were always talking about food. And so when we were researching more about like controller design, Nick brought in his Breville immersion blender, and it was just a super satisfying functional design, and it became apparent that we wanted to explore other kitchen tools and see like how their gestures could be potentially translated into that the D-pad and the AB controller mapping.
But at this point, it was really just kind of looking at those tools and really appreciating the ergonomics of them and saying, like, well, we like the way that the body or the hand fits these tools, and maybe this is a way that we can think about new controllers. But then some of the functionality was retained, it seems like. So what was the point where you realized, well, so the main thing, one of the main controllers that you focused on ended up being a juicer, and which seemed like it kind of gave some really nice tactile kind of rumble pack feedback style in its actuation. But was it immediately clear that you decided like, well, we can still make juice at the same time while we're playing games, or was that?
Yeah, it actually all started with our research on ergonomics. When Nick brought in his blender, like we were really talking about how good ergonomic is and how that can inform our design. And then when we start to brainstorm what we actually want to do, we naturally think about all sorts of kitchen tools and see if we can get inspired on that. And it really comes very natural when we start to think about like kitchen tools, and we think about maybe we can make food out of it. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think from the beginning, once we had this kind of focus on the kitchen tools, it was a pretty natural progression of, well, we want it to still work as a kitchen tool and play the game, and that there's this kind of satisfying double, like there's the physical interaction with the rolling out dough with the rolling pin controller, or juicing a lime or something like that with the juicers while playing the game. I think we kind of had that baked in from the beginning, is when we started going down that path, is like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do both at the same time?
Which, I mean, I think that, I found really engaging, I think, from the start when I started to see that was a path that you guys were going down. On one hand, I mean, I think that when you did your playtesting session and some of your other user testing, obviously, I mean, I think that people engage with it and they see it as very fun and playful thing. And I think that there's a level of playfulness that goes into like using kitchen appliances in that way. But I think a little bit beyond that, deeper than that, you start to see there's some pretty fundamentally compelling ideas in terms of being able to bridge essentially on-screen content or virtualized systems with physical functional systems. And if you can kind of double that effort or that interaction in a way to be able to do things in both sides or something like that, actually does have some kind of profound implications there. So,
yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was interesting with the juicers, we ended up using current sensors to get an input when the juicer had been pressed, right, and made the choice to go with a non-invasive one. And kind of we were talking about that is that there are tons of applications for that in terms of using that with other. We were talking about using that with power tools, using that with in something like having a current sensor on an AC unit and being able to do something with that, right? That the kind of possibilities for that are endless.
Yeah, very much. I mean, like, let's talk a little bit about the hardware and the tech, because those sensors, essentially what we're talking about, the team, you guys were able to passively put those sensors on just the power cord of the appliance. And, these can basically just monitor a spike in the voltage or the current that's being used, rather, when the appliance is in one state or another. So if it's an on state or an off state. But I think that the really interesting thing is that the level of precision and accuracy that you're able to do that monitoring to the point where you really were able to get an accurate and responsive button press, something for the gameplay that you were doing for Dance Dance Revolution, I think it was. Yeah. So I mean, like that's a particularly difficult game where the button press needs to be highly time sensitive in a sense.
Right.
And like I think that I forget what that cutoff is with interaction, but I mean I think it's up to anything around. There's like that window of 250 milliseconds is something like it's very perceivable, and when you have something that's even a little bit in that window of delay, it's felt in terms of gameplay. And so, can you talk about like how that was easy getting the getting the appliances to work as well as they ended up? Or?
There was definitely a lot of trial and error in that. I mean, I knew, we knew that exactly what you said, that it was going to have to be precise in order for to play that kind of rhythm-based game where you need to be able to hit a button and have that immediate kind of feedback. Took a little while for us to, and that was why we started off initially playing Flappy Bird with that just a single button press with a single juicer, and working on the timing and working on just from a software perspective, kind of smoothing out the inputs and getting an understanding of exactly how those were coming in to do that. I mean, I think. It took a while.
I would say that was the most difficult part of all the software part of this project.
Yeah, like the non-invasive current sensor would pick up a lot of noise. So
for sure.
There was a lot of coding to smooth out those values, to minimize the latency. And if any of the wires would cross over, it would pick up, like the current sensor would pick up the
because you're going to have like induction in some of the
exactly. So we had to
yeah.
isolate each wire and make sure that everything was totally separate.
Yeah, I think that's the most complicated thing with these systems is, on one hand, you're taking proprietary systems from somebody else built and trying to sense those, and then understanding environmental factors in terms of where's that noise coming from and how to isolate that stuff. It's not easy. I think getting it to work as well as you guys have is really impressive, especially within the amount of time that you had. But I think that the other applications are kind of vast in terms of being able to immediately, some of the ideas that I started thinking about are obviously, we hear so much about the Internet of Things these days and all this stuff. Most of the time, I think we see IoT applications in the realm of, we look at sort of like the IoT clearinghouses, like if this, then that, or some of the cloud-based applications in that way, where they're fairly simple ideas where it's like if this thing goes on, then send a text message there, or things that already have integrated APIs that are kind of already built for that. But something like this, you can actually have really fine-tuned control, where if you were able to monitor in a passive sense the way that you guys have unique appliance states, that could do some fairly specific triggering for other things like that. So it's and the fact that it could be ancient piece of equipment, maybe like a, a power tool or a fan or like another kitchen appliance that was built, before the age of IoT or any of these things that might have things that could be sensed in a discrete manner like that. I mean, I think that being able to apply sort of game control to one thing, to appliances is one factor, but I think that there's a lot of other exciting ways that you could apply it as well.
Yeah.
And then there was so talk a little bit about the conroller, as it's called, which is a modified rolling pin, which is still functional for creating pizza.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was so early on when we were part of the process as we started getting into using these kitchen tools was everybody just bringing in kitchen tools from their house, and somebody, I think Kathy, brought in a rolling pin.
That's right.
And so we were kind of playing with these different things and like, oh, it feels good, and thinking about how those would map to different games and that kind of thing, and really liked the action of a rolling pin as moving a character on screen or moving along an axis. That was kind of the inspiration for the conroller. And then it was a kind of an interesting design challenge once we had the movement working. I mean, it took us a while to kind of figure out what's the best. Using accelerometers, rotary encoders, just different kind of ways of getting the input of movement from the rolling pin itself, and then trying to figure out how to add in other gameplay aspects to that as well. Was an interesting challenge.
And then you also did you meet or speak with anyone in terms of indie game design or the ideas of building games specifically for some of these controllers?
Yeah, that's actually our next step.
Okay, cool.
We're hoping to speak to game developers and see if we can push it to the next level. Yeah,
because I feel like it's one thing to control like Galaga with the rolling pin, but then there's all the other possibility is really like you could create a very specific game for some of these controllers that and that's always like this, I guess, that back and forth between standardization and kind of the universality of control versus the specificity of control, and how those things can really be powerful in both directions. But and so let's talk a little bit about your time here at Brooklyn Research. I mean, Brooklyn Research is this is the first. You guys are the first kind of guinea pigs here, the very first generation of the summer research session, which is something that we're really excited to be doing because it sort of extends a lot of the different culture that goes on at Brooklyn Research. Not just the fact that we really are trying to build a place that is, kind of built on research-driven programming in that sense, but also, we build a lot of interesting things here on the commercial side too. And the idea really behind doing the summer research team was that, if we could take some of that those ideas in terms of building new interactive systems, but really kind of have it wide open in the sense that we don't have to build for anybody else. We can explore something that is totally unique and not driven primarily by commercial ends. And so, it's been really exciting having you guys here to do that. But you've had pretty much free reign and access to anything here. I mean, has it been overall a good experience, or?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the space here and I enjoy working here. And like all the people here, including you, are very helpful and nice.
Well, we try our best, but
yeah, I mean, I think I really appreciated the kind of what you're describing, the open-endedness of the project, in the sense that we were given this kind of brief, but we're never given you have to do it this way, or a very specific thing, and we're allowed to kind of do the research and let it unfold and explore it from there. That you guys were available for help and mentorship with everything from the fabrication to the design to the research, all of it as well. It's been great.
Awesome.
Yeah, and also like this project lasts for 12 weeks. So like I really appreciate the fact that I get to really investigate this amount of time on just one project instead of when I'm in school. I usually just spend 2 weeks on the project and then it goes so fast. So I really appreciate it.
Very much. I think that that's oftentimes a difficult thing, especially at ITP, is that
Yeah.
you have it's always that balance between breadth and depth, I think, in that sense, where, how much can you really, I think oftentimes the great thing about my time at ITP was just the broad exposure. Obviously that's a hugely important thing, and the people that you meet there. But yeah, it's oftentimes you can't finish things take things to the point of finality that you might want to.
Yeah, like not only is Brooklyn Research like interdisciplinary tech art hub, it's really the sense of community here that like everyone is just pushing each other. You can always talk to anybody and snowball ideas, and if you can think it, you can make it, and everyone's around to help you along the way.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys so much for talking with me today.
Yeah, thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah.
This podcast is made possible by Brooklyn Research and the donors that support its programming. Brooklyn Research is a recognized 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're supported in part by Hall Type Holdings and Brooklyn Research's for-profit consultancy. Our staff includes Alex Dodge, Azer Longinus, Johnny Liu, Daria Dubaskaya, and Oscar Solis. Our theme music is by Tom Ray Dodge. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media via our website at www.brooklynresearch.org.